You salute the flag. You think you're honoring the blood and sacrifice of a nation. But that red, once made from crushed insects, that blue, from empires built on slavery. The flag didn't survive because it was sacred. It survived because it was cheap. The flag is not woven from poetry. It is woven from invoices. This week, we expose the shocking financial anatomy of the world's most powerful symbol. To understand a flag, you start with color. Over 200 nations. Almost the same 5 colors. Why? Because the nation builders didn't go to poets. They went to their accountants. To get a deep red, a color that signaled power and sovereignty, a king had to crush thousands of cochineal insects. The dye was precious and highly unstable. A wound to the royal treasury. And purple, the color of emperors, that required killing 250,000 sea snails for just 1 ounce. Purple didn't symbolize royalty because it was beautiful. It symbolized a murderous monopoly. If a color couldn't be made cheaply, if it posed a threat to the budget, it was erased from the national design. The fabric used for flags and uniforms was the single greatest cost of war, second only to the soldiers themselves. What about blue? Blue survived not because it was cheap, but because empires controlled the indigo trade routes, often through brutality. The flag was always a constant, agonizing compromise. What shade can we afford to print on 1,000,000 yards of cloth and still win the war? And this is where we find one of history's great tragedies, the color green. You see green everywhere today, but why is it muted or missing from so many major flags? Because historically, green was the relentless enemy of the spreadsheet. Green was chemically unstable, easily bleached by sun and salt, forcing nations to constantly re-dye their symbols. Green meant immediate, costly replacement. Imagine being a soldier watching your nation's proud banner fade into rot on the battlefield, while the enemy still shines bright. That wasn't a metaphor, it was chemistry. Yes, a few revolutionary republics like Italy chose green for its powerful symbolism, knowing the dye was fragile. But these were exceptions that only proved the empire's rule. If you couldn't standardize it, if you couldn't guarantee its stability, it was banished. Green was exiled from the primary palette not by political decree, but by the quarterly ledger. By the 1850s, chemistry solved the color problem, flooding the world with synthetic dyes. The colors of freedom. Red, white, and blue were now mass-produced by the very empires people fought to escape, simply because they were the cheapest thread on the catalogue. But the pattern has its own chilling story. Look closely at nearly every flag in the world. It's a rectangle, a 2:3 or 1:2 ratio. You might think this is an aesthetic choice, but it's a factory mandate. The global rectangle was dictated by the British merchant shipping system. A flag that wasted fabric was a flag that wasted profit, and profit was the new god. Those specific dimensions were calculated by industrial engineers to maximize the fabric cut from a standardized roll. The flag's shape isn't a gesture of freedom, it's the ultimate icon of industrial efficiency. The finality of the factory bolt cemented the rectangle as the global default. So if the colors and dimensions were chosen by chemists and cutting machines, what about the stars and stripes? You think the pattern tells a story of revolution. But in a commercial world, a flag is simply a contract. If your flag looked unstable, your shipping insurance rates went up. You don't salute a symbol, you salute a stable credit rating. Take Liberia, a flag that's basically America's but with 1 star. Its founders were signaling to Western traders, power recognizes power. This is a nation safe for capital, built in the American commercial image. But there is one major, glorious exception that proves the rule of standardization. Look at Nepal. It is the only national flag in the world that is not a rectangle or a square. It is 2 overlapping pennants. The survival of this unique shape reveals the true force behind standardization. Nepal's flag never bowed to the cutting floor. because the nation was never fully absorbed by the empires that dictated the rules of commercial textile trade. And if you want a full deep dive on Nepal's unique history, check out our Nations of the World video linked above. The world's flags became rectangles because that was the cheapest cut. Nepal stayed triangular because it never bowed to the balance sheet. Your flag is not made of meaning. It's woven from invoices, every color, every stitch, priced, standardized, and approved by a ledger. You don't salute cloth. You salute a balance sheet. The systems that define your world were never chosen for virtue. They were chosen because they were cheap. When efficiency becomes our god, meaning is its first sacrifice, and we call the loss progress. If this is your first time watching, go back and start the series with episode 1, The Anatomy of Time. Next week, we dissect the flag's master, the dollar bill. It's not backed by gold, it's backed by a feud. Printed in a color no one can reproduce. The history of that ink reveals the true story of how modern money was invented, not in a treasury but in a printer's feud. Subscribe, because every system you live by has an anatomy, and once you see it, you can't unsee it.